wants to know, how do you not lose too much weight on keto? I do not absorb fat well. I'm so glad you brought that up, June, because there are people that the ketogenic diet is right for, and there are people that the ketogenic diet is not right for. So like, who should not be on a ketogenic diet? Like, and I'm talking again, this super high fat. If you've had gallbladder surgery and you don't have a gallbladder, so if you've had your gallbladder removed, you're probably going to struggle on a high-fat, low-carb diet, because you're probably going to have a lot of pain, a lot of shoulder blade pain, a lot of central liver pain as a result of the inability to properly get enough bile into your small intestine to be able to emulsify the fat. Otherwise, that fat becomes acidic in your intestine. It can disrupt the microbiome and create problems. So if you're struggling, if you don't have a gallbladder, this is probably more of a solution for you. And then if you don't have a gallbladder, one of the things that you can do to help your fat absorption is ox bile, choline, taurine, and vitamin C supplementation. These are all necessary to help your body, the choline, the taurine, the vitamin C, to make bile, to make your own bile. And if you don't have a gallbladder, it doesn't mean you can't make bile. It just means you don't have the sac that stores extra bile and secretes it into the small intestine. Your liver is actually where the bile is produced. But these nutrients can help support your fat absorption. Another one is that you might consider lipase. If you've ever taken, I have a product called Gluten Shield. I have another one called Ultra Digest GB. The Digest GB stands for gallbladder, right? And so that's because it's a very high level of lipase in that product for people that don't have gallbladders. I'm just trying to help them support their capacity to metabolize and break down fat in their GI tracts without it creating some type of a problem for them. So if you don't have a gallbladder, you've got to be real careful. The diet might not be the best fit for you. I'd stick maybe somewhere in this neighborhood. So going back to June's question, that so this I think was part of it, but the other part of it was, how do you not lose too much weight? I think the bigger thing is, if you're losing weight too rapidly, if it's coming off and you feel uncomfortable, or you don't feel healthy, or you feel like that weight's coming off too quickly, throttle it back. Understand that you're going from imbalance to imbalance, and there's all this in between that can also be successful. You don't need a ketogenic diet to lose weight. If I could show you the millions of pounds of weight loss I've seen over the last 20 years in my clients that have come in my clinic, very few of them actually needed to be on a ketogenic diet to do that. So again, going back to what I said earlier, a lot of people, their benefit on the ketogenic diet is actually more because it's a gluten-free diet. And for many, going gluten-free is enough. It's enough to start the weight loss process. It's enough to really get the inflammation under control, where you don't have to go all the way to keto. Suk wants to know, is a ketogenic diet good for scleroderma? It's a great question. I would say better than a ketogenic diet for scleroderma, at least in my experience, because I've seen a number of cases of that over the years, is a grain-free diet. And there are a number of reasons why, Suk. If you read No Grain, No Pain, I don't know if you have a copy, it's my best-selling book. I talk about a number of different factors in grain, including gluten being one of them, but mold toxins. Many people with scleroderma are susceptible to mold and mold toxins. Many people with scleroderma have issues with high levels of omega-6 fatty acid because of overconsumption of grain. So I'd start with a grain-free diet. I can't say the ketogenic diet has ever been something I've had to put people with scleroderma on in order to see them have results. So both good questions. Let's move to the next question. Can you explain cycling? I followed low carb, but I am so skinny, I am embarrassed. You mean, Barb, I'm not sure. Quantify that for me. So if you're asking about cycling, are you asking about cycling ketone, staying in ketosis and then coming out of it, like cycling back and forth? Because I'm fairly certain that you're not asking me about bicycling. But I want to just make sure I have that right so I can answer your question adequately. Sandy wants to know, is keto good for inflammation? It can be. Again, remember, going back to what I said, if you take away anything from tonight, it's most people going keto are really going away from carbohydrate toxicity, and carbohydrate toxicity creates inflammation. And so by default, by going in this direction, is a ketogenic diet anti-inflammatory. I would say it's anti-inflammatory not because the diet itself is anti-inflammatory, but because the diet takes you away from an inflammatory diet. So it'll have anti-inflammatory effects because you'll have reduced the quantity of inflammation induced by high levels or toxic levels of carbohydrate in your diet. So hopefully that's helpful for you. But yes, it can be good for inflammation if you're carbohydrate toxic. Now, if you're already somewhat here, and maybe you're debating, hey, maybe I'm still feeling bad, I'm still inflamed, I'm not quite sure why. I wonder if keto might help. Look, that's where I really highly would encourage somebody to go into this ketogenic diet and dive into it a little bit deeper. Let's see here. Barb wants to know, can I eat more healthy carbs and hit ketosis by using MCT oils or ketone salt esters? Is this safe? So this is what I was referring to. This is a great question, Barb. If you're not an athlete that's just trying to get more energy substrate by taking these ketone esters, so like a lot of athletes will take ketone esters to help sustain their energy for athletic performance, but to use them to be in ketosis, look, these are highly processed, highly refined products that don't, including MCT oil. A lot of people put MCT oil in their coffee. There's this whole thing where people want to add that coconut oil or other forms of MCT, palm oil, etc., into their drinks, into their smoothies, into their shakes. Look, I don't know that I would really particularly recommend using highly processed based fats to add to your diet. You're going to get into the same struggle or the same mistake that so many get into when on this side of the equation, which is I like to look and think back at one day we're going to look back at all this processed oil that people are adding to their drinks. And we're going to equate that to much in the same way that we equate to like these low-fat, no-fat cookies that people were eating in the 80s to maintain low fat in their diet. Those Snackwells and those other brands, they come out and they were cookies or other junk food, and it was low carb, or rather high carbohydrate, no fat. So they took the fat out of it, but they added all the carbohydrate in because lack of fat lacks taste, so they added carbohydrate in for the taste. And it made people sick. I think the same thing is going to be true on this other side. If you add in a bunch of MCT oil and processed fats in order to get fat, instead of eating real food that has real healthy fat in it, I think you're going to end up sorely disappointed in your outcome long term. Marie, in what way is a keto diet different from the diet described in No Grain, No Pain? It's very different. It's a great question. The ketogenic diet, remember the No Grain, No Pain diet follows more structured equality amongst your macronutrients. So 33% of your calories, and this is not 33 grams, this is not grams, this is calories. So like 33% of your total calories from carbs, from fat, and from protein. And in No Grain, No Pain, I kind of stick more to that rule of thumb versus, we're talking about ketogenic diet. We're looking more like 60, 15, 5, right? Or depending on the person, sometimes 10 or 20, just again, depending on, 25, 15. So the ketogenic diet kind of falls where you could bump down your carbs 15%, as far down as 5%, again, depending on the person and what it takes to actually put them in keto, versus No Grain, No Pain, which is an equal distribution of calories coming from carbs, fats, and proteins. So that's really the big difference. Again, the other difference would be depending on the type of ketogenic diet you're following. If you're making some of those mistakes that I mentioned earlier not to make, like those big keto mistakes, predominantly processed food is a staple in your diet, it's a bad idea. Oh, I like this question. June and Jeanette want to know if I'm including stevia in the category of artificial sweeteners. The answer to that is no. Stevia has actually been studied to not shoot up your insulin levels, whereas the others have been studied to do that. So the stevia would be unacceptable. Matthew wants to know, how does keto help epilepsy and other similar neurological disorders? Well, the way we think that it works, people with epilepsy and other neurological disorders have kind of a metabolic inability to, I'm going to have to make some room on the board so I can explain this to you, Matthew. and metabolic inability to really process sugar very well to generate and drive the energy production. So I'm going to show you a drawing that might be helpful in understanding this. So if we call this your pancreas, and we call this your bloodstream, and then down here, and again, this is a rudimentary drawing. It's not designed for scale of accuracy, etc. This is your cell. Okay. Your pancreas, initially, what happens, okay, so we eat food. So here comes the food, right? Food is over here. We break it down, and then we get glucose as a substrate in the bloodstream. And glucose is again, one of the body's sources of energy substrate. So what happens, so we call this step one, which is food. Okay, so let me get out of your way so you can see it. So step one is what we eat. That glucose hits the bloodstream. Step two is that glucose sends a message to our pancreas, right? And then coming from this perspective, the pancreas responds, hopefully if it's working, right? The pancreas produces insulin into the bloodstream. So we'll call that insulin. So this is step 3. And then step 4, insulin will send, basically, it will come into contact with the insulin receptors on the surface of your cells. So here's insulin now. It's binding or docking to that cell. Okay, we'll call that step 4. Then that insulin will come and it will open up something in the door of your cell called a GLUT1 transporter. GLUT1, it's a fancy scientific way of saying the glucose door on your cell. So this glucose cannot get into your cell until this doorway opens. So we call this step 5. And then from here, that glucose can now come into your cell, and it can be pumped through something called Krebs cycle, which is a biochemical process that takes and strips the carbon and hydrogen off of that glucose and drives that hydrogen through a series of pumps that generates the energy that our body needs cellularly, called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. So at the sake of not boring you all to death with biochemistry, we'll call this step 6. So going back to your question, Matthew, which is how does it help people with epilepsy or neurological problems? People with epilepsy and neurological problems oftentimes have problems with parts of these steps. So it's very, so let me come back in and draw in some more details to help you understand. So step 2 right here, this process for glucose to talk to the pancreas requires vitamin D. You have a lot of vitamin D receptors on your pancreas that, again, their job is to detect glucose to tell the pancreas to produce insulin. Insulin, in order to be properly produced, you need magnesium, you need zinc, you need vitamin B12. This insulin receptor is actually made out of vitamin B3, and it's made out of chromium. They kind of combine together to form your insulin receptors on the surface of your cells. And then for this message to go through and this doorway to open, this is, you need something called inositol, which is a B vitamin-like substance, and you need calcium for this to happen. And then once this glucose can now, and if all this is happening and all this is well and all is right in the world, and you can get that glucose into the cell, then there are a number of biochemical steps. There's Krebs cycle, and then there's something called electron transport chain. Those steps require massive quantities of B vitamins. It requires magnesium. It requires zinc and iron and copper and coenzyme Q10. These are nutrients necessary to convert that sugar through the chemical steps into energy. Now, people with Alzheimer's, people with neurological degenerative diseases, people with epilepsy, oftentimes we'll find they have a problem with these areas. So they're not capable accurately of getting that glucose from food through all of these processes to generate and drive the production, because the outcome of this is ATP, which is energy, right? And so they don't do that very well. And so what we're doing instead with the ketone diet is we're bypassing this whole mechanism, and instead we're plugging in ketone bodies. And ketone bodies are a rich substrate that the body can produce energy by a different mechanism. So this is what we think is happening with epilepsy, is that those people have problems with their glucose transport, and that bypassing that allows their brain to generate adequate energy and allow those neurons to continue to fire. So long way chemically about going and answering a question, but I think it's important because many of you that are out there with epilepsy might get great benefit from that. So let's see here. What do we got next? Barb wants to know, in response to your question about cycling, I meant, should you do low-carb days under 50 grams and higher days? I find it hard to stay under if I eat lots of fruits and veggies, yet is it healthy when you're worried about veggie intake to try to do keto for autophagy? Look, if you want to do autophagy, fast, intermittent fast on a regular basis. You don't necessarily need keto for autophagy. As far as cycling keto, look, I don't recommend staying in keto. And if you talk to most experts, they don't either. They'll actually recommend that you cycle in and out of it. Think of it like this. You want resiliency to be able to go back and forth or in the middle, right? You want your body to be able to burn carbs. You want your body to be able to burn fat. You want your body to be able to burn a balance of both. If you stay here all the time, you weaken your ability to do this. If you stay here all the time, you weaken your body ability to do this. It's kind of like training your muscles. If you don't train your legs and then you go have a squat day, you're going to be really weak and you're going to regret how hard it is to walk for the next 3 days because your body wasn't weight adapted to lift weight in your legs. We want your body to be fat burning adapted, but we also want it to be glucose burning adapted. We want it to have metabolic resiliency, dynamic capacity to switch to flip the switch to either side so that you can convert and make and produce energy. Let's see, Rachel wants to know, I have Crohn's and am in pain. I'm on a gluten-free diet and I do 18 to 24-hour intermittent fasting, still in pain. Do you think a keto diet would help? I would ask this question, Rachel. Is your diet gluten-free traditionally, or is your diet true gluten-free? And if you don't know what that means, you need to go over to glutenfreesociety.org and sign up for a gluten-free survival guide. Because many people that have Crohn's, that have autoimmune inflammatory bowel disease, they think they're on a gluten-free diet, but they're not. They're still eating lots of other kind of sneaky or hidden forms of gluten or other grains that they think are gluten-free that aren't. And so that, for many of those individuals, is part of why. The other thing with that is I would get with a good functional medicine doctor. Ketogenic diet may not solve that problem. You want to know there could be a lot of different things going on. So like any of you, those of you for other questions that might be coming in a similar topic, if you have autoimmunity, there's 4 triggers for autoimmune disease. None of those triggers are the lack of a keto diet. Those triggers are, very simply put, eating the wrong food, being exposed to the wrong chemicals, having a microbial imbalance, either of abnormal bacteria, parasitic, yeast overgrowth, viruses, etc., or the 4th cause being having a low level of micronutrient status, meaning your vitamin and mineral status is too low. And you should start, any of you with autoimmunity should start by having your good doctor measure those 4 areas first and measure them comprehensively. Don't measure one at a time and kind of try a little here, try a little there. I call that piecemealing. You can't piecemeal holism. You have to approach it from its holistic impact and effect. So Jelana wants to know, so if you're obese, is it safe to stay on the ketogenic diet until your normal weight again? Probably. It's probably pretty safe. I would say it depends on how obese you are, and it depends on a lot of other variables and factors. I mean, if you're morbidly obese and you're struggling and you just want to regain your health, and part of that is to lose that weight, my opinion is, get into keto, get into the keto diet and start losing that weight. But you probably would be better off if you had somebody helping you measuring certain metabolic markers along the way to make sure you weren't putting yourself in any jeopardy or in any danger. See, why is a keto diet not good for people with low thyroid? I don't know that I agree with that statement. I don't know that I would agree with that at all. I think there's a trend going around. I think what happens more than anything else is people with thyroid issues go from high carb to high fat, and they go through a flu-like period, and they think that because they feel fatigued and it impacts them a lot in the same way that hypothyroidism might impact them, that they feel like it made their thyroid condition worse. But I don't feel like it's necessarily the bad move or a wrong move for people that have hypothyroidism. I think, again, if you're dealing with chronic illness, you should be working with a functional medicine doctor to help you understand and navigate those diet changes, but I don't necessarily know that I would agree with that. Let's see, kids at risk. Do you have a YouTube session on what carbs, fats, and proteins are good? Yeah, I have a whole book on that. If you want to read No Grain, No Pain, I list out all the healthy carbs, fats, and proteins that I recommend people consume. Rhiannon wants to know what carbs are best when starting. So it's not necessarily, look, don't think of this as good, better, best unless it's processed food. If it's processed food, it's just bad and get rid of it. Think of it as it's not a matter of this carb is worse or that carb is worse. It's a matter of how you respond to that carb. So for example, some people, if you have your own home glucose monitor, you might find that certain fruits, for example, drive your blood sugar much, much higher than others, right? Everybody's a little bit unique in that regard. So it's not one carb is good for all, one carb is bad for all. Generally speaking, the two I see in terms of carbohydrate that tend to push people further up on the insulin glucose scale is bananas and grapes. And then in addition to bananas and grapes, it's dried fruit. So if you're a big dried fruit junkie, the trail makes the raisins, the dried mangoes and cranberries that are coated with sugar, that kind of stuff. I generally would tend to tell you to avoid those different types of things if you're trying to get into a keto state. Yeah, so Deborah says, so instead of MCT oil, what about just putting in regular coconut oil in your smoothies, coffee, or tea? Yeah, that would be an alternative, a good alternative. Xylitol, Danielle wants to know, what about using xylitol? Different people will react to xylitol in different ways. I'd say generally xylitol would be safe, but I would encourage you first, if you're going to use a lot of xylitol, to measure your blood sugar spikes around it and make sure that it's not pumping or driving up your blood glucose. Additionally, with xylitol, the more you eat, if you haven't ever eaten it before, xylitol it feeds the bacteria in the GI. For a lot of people, xylitol in too high quantities causes a lot of gastric distress, a lot of gastric bloating, and other issues. So make sure if you're going to use xylitol, start out small and work your way up. And also make sure that, because many xylitol products are made from GMO corn, and so if you're following the no grain, no pain diet, or you're trying to adhere to some of the premises of the rules that I have in terms of healthy diet, you've got to be careful to buy only a birchwood-derived xylitol, birchwood-derived versus corn-derived. Monk fruit as a sweetener, check your blood sugar if you're going to use it, because for some it can drive it up, for others not so much. Okay. What if a person does not have all the enzymes required in their gut? Not sure. I mean, if a person doesn't have all the enzymes required for what? Because you have enzymes that digest fat, that digest protein, that digest carbohydrate. If you're talking as a general rule of thumb, if you're talking about the enzymes to digest fat, many people, especially with chronic autoimmune disease, you could develop, well, I got a picture here. So the pancreas has channels in it. And so I'm just trying to so your again, I'm not the best artist in the world, but I'm trying to give you an idea. So in your pancreas, you have this system of tubes that goes through your pancreas, and you have these sections of your pancreas that produce digestive enzymes like elastase and lipase. And these digestive enzymes, once they're produced, they travel out your pancreas and they dump off into your small intestine. So if your small intestine connects up to your pancreas here, there's a duct that connects your small intestine, and then your small intestine goes down. So these enzymes are released into your small intestine, where then they can go to work and help you digest your fats. Now, many people with autoimmune disease, there's actually a form of autoimmunity called pancreatitis, so they may have some inflammation in their pancreas, and so then their pancreas won't function at full capacity. It's not adequately producing these enzymes to pump into the small intestinal tract, and if that happens, then you might be suffering with some pretty severe malabsorption. In those cases, it's a great idea to supplement with something like Ultra Digest or with something like Gluten Shield, which is a full spectrum enzyme as well. It's not just an enzyme that helps to degrade gluten if you get cross-contamination. It's also a full spectrum digestive formula. So if you have low enzymes and you've been told you had low enzymes, taking digestive enzyme 10 minutes before you eat your meal is going to help you to digest properly and to metabolize those things in your GI tract. So that includes if you're on a ketogenic diet where you're eating a lot of fat. Again, a digestive enzyme with adequate levels of lipase in it would be very supportive of your ability to break down fat in the GI tract and then get those into your bloodstream and start converting them into energy. Good question. Okay, let's see here. June says, what did you eat today, Dr. Osborne? I like that with the smiley face. So I'm an open book. Like this morning for breakfast, I didn't eat breakfast. I actually fast most days. I do at least a 16-8 fast most days. So this morning I got up about 5 o'clock, went and worked out, and then after that, had a morning cup. Actually, this morning I drank some mushroom coffee. If you're interested in knowing what kind of mushroom coffee, we can put a link of that brand up on the site for you. But it's a reishi spore mix, and so generally. I had a cup of that, and then I didn't eat until lunchtime, in which I had about a pound of salad and with mixed greens. So most of those greens were spinach and arugula and chard with blueberries. I put about 4 or 5 ounces of blueberries over the top and about 25 grams of pumpkin seed with some Japanese sweet potato medallions across it. I don't use any salad dressing, don't believe in them. I just don't like the processed garbage that's in them. And then I had sliced chicken breast over the top of that with some homemade tomato sauce over the top of the chicken breast. So that was my major meal so far today, and I'm getting ready to go home, and I'll probably eat whatever my wife is cooking, which is usually a pile of vegetables with some form of meat. So I don't know what's on the agenda tonight, and when I get home, I'll be able to tell you later. So that's what I've had today, and a lot of water, a ton of water. What about honey and organic maple sugar in small amounts now and again? Yeah, that's fine. I mean, honey and maple sugar in small amounts, just keeping in mind that when you say maple sugar, what I really mean is actual raw grade A maple syrup, not processed down crystallized maple sugar, but the actual syrup that's not processed. So food combining, somebody's asking about food combining. It's not that I don't believe in it, but if you have a healthy gut, you don't need to worry about food combining. Having stomach issues and gut problems when you combine certain foods because you're combining carbs, for example, with protein, is a sign that you have a weak microbiome and a non-diverse microbiome capable of helping you digest your own foods. So where food combining can be helpful, it's not the food combining. There's nothing wrong with looking at food combining as a strategy when you're trying to recover. But as a measure of your health, you should not need to worry about splitting out your carbs, your fats, your proteins away from each other, because you should have adequate gut microbiome and adequate pancreatic and adequate liver function. Those are your GI's accessory organs that help you digest your food. All that should be working cohesively together as a unit to help you process and digest the foods that you put in, provided they're real foods. So unless you have some kind of, again, chronic history of celiac disease where you have so much villus atrophy and scarring in your intestine where you have a loss of digestive capacity overall. And those are unique circumstances. Not everybody has that, but those are circumstances that some people have. And again, that's why we've created an array of different products to support people with gluten sensitivity issues. Gluten Shield is a digestive aid, Ultra Acid for people that have had gastric damage and parietal cell damage as a product to help you break down your meats, the product to help you break down a lot of your proteins, and then the full digestive array of enzymes that help you break down all carbs, fats, and proteins simultaneously within your intestines. So that's why we created our product line, was to help people with that chronic scarring. Elizabeth Tucker says, no salad dressing, but how about using cold pressed flaxseed oil and apple cider vinegar as a replacement? You could. There's nothing wrong with doing either one of those things. You could also use Some people like avocado oil on their salad. Some people like olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, cold pressed on their salad organically. Those are perfectly fine. It's, what I eat is my preference, and as long as it follows the guidelines and the rules of what real food actually is, I don't think it's going to be a problem for you. Where people get into trouble is they go over to that salad food or that salad dressing aisle in the grocery store, and they're I don't even want to say their names. I don't want their attorneys calling me, but the brands that I'm talking about, and number one ingredient is corn syrup, number two ingredient is MSG, and then there's all kinds of other flavoring agents. It's not real food. A lot of parents put this stuff on like broccoli and vegetables so their kids will eat vegetables, which I think is a bad idea. I think you should just teach your kids to eat vegetables, and if they don't want to eat them, then they'll let them go hungry until they're hungry enough that they're going to eat them. But we all have different parenting styles, so it's not my judgment on anybody. But I don't like salad dressing because most of them are processed. Now, does that mean you can't make your own homemade salad dressing with natural cold-pressed oils that are organic, vinaigrettes and other things? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It's just you asked me what I ate and I told you. Okay, so again, hopefully that gives you kind of a breakdown or a basis of why the ketogenic diet, again, might be helpful for you. And again, who just kind of in reiteration, who is going to benefit the most from a ketogenic diet? Predominantly, if you've got seizure disorder, if you've been diagnosed with epilepsy, if you've got diabetes or prediabetes or blood sugar swings, if you're a self-proclaimed carbaholic, where you're high levels of sugar cravings, where you crash and you get hangry all the time because your blood sugars are crashing if you don't get your next sugar fix, like ketogenic diet might be the solution to get you to be able to generate energy from your fat again. And so those are the people that we're going to see that are going to benefit from that ketogenic diet, aside from the ones with neurological damage or neurological diseases, and aside from the ones that basically are really struggling to lose weight and they're eating well, they're exercising well, sleeping well. Ketogenic diet can be a strategy for that as well. So if you fall into that category, this diet might be right for you. Beyond that, don't get so caught up in the nuance of trying to count absolutely everything. Remember that the whole goal of a ketogenic diet, the keto is just a name, and it's named after the substrate. Ketone bodies are broken down when you metabolize fats, and then you use those ketone bodies as a source to generate energy. Your brain loves them, your liver loves using them, your muscles love to use ketones. But at the end of the day, you just really want your body to be able to burn fat as fuel, to be able to burn carbohydrate as fuel, pretty well equally and balanced over time. So the ketogenic diet is just a tool or a mechanism to help get people into training their bodies to utilize fat more efficiently as a fuel source, so they're not reliant on carbohydrates, which is arguably a less efficient fuel source. We know it's less efficient as a fuel source for your heart. There's other research studies are forward coming, probably going to confirm that ketones are a better resource or energy resource for your mind and a better energy resource for your liver. But generally speaking, again, what we're trying to accomplish with a ketogenic diet, unless you're having a doctor follow you, monitor you, and treat one of those conditions, you're trying to accomplish metabolic resiliency, your ability to burn fat as a fuel, as opposed to being insulin resistant and storing all that fat and not having the ability to tap into it or access it as a source of energy. Because ultimately, that's where a lot of people are obese. It's because it's not necessarily for any other reason that they're so carbohydrate toxic and their body has lost the ability to tap into that fat as an energy substrate. So hopefully that's helpful for you. What I'd like you to do next, if you haven't already, is come visit me at glutenfreesociety.org. Sign up for our free gluten-free survival kit. And if you haven't already subscribed, hit that little bell and that little subscribe button down on the left-hand side of the page as well. If you've got additional show topics you want to see me cover in the future, shoot me an email at glutenology@gmail.com. We're going to entertain as many of those as we can if they're a good fit for the show. And as always, spread the love with somebody you love. Our goal here is we're trying to help save 100 million lives. That's how many people are chronically sick. And for every person you share this video with, or share this URL with, or share this message with, that's just one more life that we're saving, one more life that we're changing. Thanks for helping me change the world. I'm wishing you an excellent week and excellent health. I'll see you next Monday night for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.